ISPC Tailboard Talks podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and today I got a special co-host with me, Mr. Mack Turner, the Executive Director of ISPC. How you doing, Mack?
Hey, it's a wonderful day.
All right. If you don't know, we're coming to you today from the floor of the NWPPA conference in Anchorage, Alaska. Not too bad in the conference, a little cold outside, but that's okay. That's that. So before we get started today, I just want to give a shout out to our podcast sponsor today, which is T&D PowerSkills. You know, these days, safety and training managers are challenged with the task of controlling their line worker training programs. These things are changing fast, and you need a solution that has the flexibility to keep up. T&D PowerSkills is a comprehensive 78-unit curriculum designed with the adult learner in mind. Control your message by customizing the program to meet your needs and training yard requirements. Control your delivery and the flexibility to scale from single-unit refresher training to fully DOL-certified apprenticeship program. Control your costs with the flexibility delivery models and scale from companies with just a few crews to large utilities and contractors. To learn more, visit us at tdpowerskills.com. That's tdpowerskills.com. And use the referral code Tailboard2024 to get an exclusive podcast listener 5% discount. Okay, ISPC Tailboard Talk topic. Since we're in Alaska today, we're going to talk a little bit about cold weather preparedness. When it comes to PPE, some of the things that we can do to keep ourselves warm by layering our clothing and obviously head and face protection and gloves and proper footwear, all go a long way to helping us keep ourselves warm and comfortable while we're out there on the job. I know, Mac, you have a lot of experience, working in some cold weather environments. What any tips or tricks you got to help with that?
Yeah, so Mark mentioned layering. It's really important because a lot of times in cold weather situations throughout the day, the temperatures change. We start out in the morning and it's a lot colder, and as the day goes on, if the sun comes out, we can shed a layer or two, and if the wind comes up, we need to maybe get some layers back on to take care of the wind. And as the day winds on, the temperatures tend to change an awful lot. Some of the areas that we got to pay special attention to are our hands and our feet. We work with our hands all day, and we have to really understand that we need the dexterity and the strength in our hands to do our job, and sometimes cold weather apparel and hand protection prohibits that. So we've got to find a good solution for that so that we can still work well and take care of things on the job and be safe working, as well as protecting our hands. There's a new glove that I saw that come out on the market that's got a internal heating system in the fingers of it that uses just a little AA battery or a rechargeable, and I think I saw it, and I think ideas like that are things that we need to pay attention to. And then with our feet, we a lot of times in cold weather we have snow and ice to deal with, as well as the cold, and so we need a good supportive footwear that has a good grip on it in this ice and the snow conditions, as well as some insulation value in it to keep our feet warm. Those of you who've worked cold weather in hooks up on a pole, that just by stepping on that hook and being on that pole, the front part of your foot really gets cold. So if you wear some good socks, stuff like that will help you keep that circulation in your feet and keep your feet warm, it's good as well.
Yeah, it's having frozen extremities is never a good thing, especially to work with your fingers and so on. So on the flip side of that, if we're not taking care of ourselves when it comes to our clothing and our PPE and such, then we get into the hazards of cold stress, right? And, frostbite, hypothermia, those type of things. And it's important because we tend to lose sight as we're working out there, especially if you're doing strenuous activity where you no matter how cold it is. I know if I'm out working, especially if you're bundled up, it's very easy to start sweating. Then your clothes start to get damp, they start to get moist, and then, we go take a break or we stop for lunch and we're hot, so we start unzipping things, and then our core temperature starts to lower and we start to get cold, and the mindset is, well, let's get back to work and I'll get warm again, right? But you've already started that process at that point of getting yourself out of whack when it comes to your core body temperature. And so, understanding and recognizing those cold-related illness signs, not only with you but with your coworkers, is a vital part as trying to prevent it in the first place. The other thing a lot of us tend to do, probably me included, is, coffee is one of the drinks of favor when it comes to staying warm. The problem is, with all the caffeine in coffee, it is actually probably doing you a disservice rather than keeping you warm. So while we want to drink warm fluids, we got to watch how much caffeine intake, energy drink intake, those type of things that we do to try to keep our bodies warm. So no different than summer, right? When things are hot out and we're told to take frequent breaks and keep our bodies cool so we don't overheat. The same applies in the winter. If you get cold, take 5-10 minutes, get out of the weather, get yourself warm again, and go back at it. Any other words of wisdom when it comes to cold weather illness?
Just be smart about it. We don't want to get too cold, get frostbite. We don't want to get too hot. It's just, and we all are different, and we've got to protect our internal systems and our bodies, in the way that benefits us. So we just need to be mindful.
Yep. Let me give another shout out to our sponsor here, and then we're going to get to a very special guest that we got here today with us. Again, our podcast sponsor for today is T&D PowerSkills. Take back control of your training message, delivery, and cost. T&D PowerSkills is a comprehensive 78-unit curriculum designed with the adult learner in mind. Control your message, control your delivery, whether you're using it as a single unit refresher training or whether you're using it as a full apprenticeship program. Control your costs, your flexibility, your delivery models, and scale it to the needs of your company, whether that's just a few crews or a large utility or contractor. To learn more, visit us at tndpowerskills.com. And as a special to this podcast, if you use the referral code Tailboard 2024, you will get a special podcast listener 5% discount. Again, that's tndpowerskills.com. Okay. Again, like we said earlier, we're at the NWPPA Alaska Conference today. We have a special guest of ours, Mr. Don Maynor, who is the Loss Control and Safety Specialist for Alaska Power Association and Eureka Insurance Exchange. How you doing this morning, Don?
Doing great. Staying warm.
We're glad to have you. I think you and Mack go back a ways as far as working together and doing things together, and hopefully we can continue that relationship and maybe even build on that relationship. So it's great to have you here today. So I guess let's start out first with the Alaska Power Association. So what is the Alaska Power Association? What do they do? What do they provide? How do they support their customers? Those type of things.
So Alaska Power Association is the statewide representative for a lot of the Alaska. I don't know the exact amount that we have, but it's over 20 now of utilities that we represent. And what we do mostly is, we keep an eye on federal and state agencies to see what kind of rules and regulations that they're bringing up, forcing. Anything that comes up like that, kind of put it out for vote. Okay. See how they want us to represent the group in those subjects. Stuff like right-of-way issues, and there's addition to drug testing now for doing oral swabs and stuff like that. So stuff that needs to be changed to stay up with the times. So that's mostly what we do, and we also provide a lot of different training opportunities for our members throughout the state, and try to keep them smart, I guess.
So I guess before we go too much further, Don, maybe just tell us a little bit about your career path and kind of what that looks like and how you got to where you are today, and just gives the listeners a little bit of background of, you know, where you came from and kind of how you got to where you are today.
So how I got with the utilities is I used to run a collection agency, actually, and I used to collect bad debt for utilities, and so I started with Golden Valley Electric up in Fairbanks in, I believe it was 2002.
Okay.
So when I first started with them, I just started with you know, collections and credit, where you know, we used to have to send notices to people and shut them off, and then bring them back up and help them try to get in the right programs and stuff like that. So I moved. I was in Anchorage, and I moved back to Fairbanks and tried to help take care of my father after he had a stroke.
Okay.
So that's how I ended up in the utility industry, and I stayed with Golden Valley Electric for 16 years about. So I started in, like I said, in collections, and then I helped with member services a little bit, and then I finally kind of made my way to safety as a profession, and enjoyed doing that. About 6 years ago, I ended up moving back to Anchorage and hanging out with, or taking a job with Alaska Power Association and their company, which is Eureka Insurance Exchange. So I do loss control visits around the state for different utilities, all different kinds of villages and towns, just to help them keep their lights on.
Maybe give us a little insight into how the electric utility world works up here in Alaska, because I think it's a little different than maybe what a lot of people are used to down in the lower 48. Just give us kind of what that landscape looks like up here.
What are some of the challenges?
Yeah.
And the issues that are more Alaska Pacific than what most, like Mark says, the rest of the 48.
Well, I mean, I hate to say that, you know, it's all weather related, but I tell you, it is a lot of weather related issues. You know, some of these small utilities, you know, they run on diesel only, and just getting diesel delivered and paying for 1 million gallons or whatever it is that they need for the whole year. They usually get one delivery a year, and they try to do it with everybody else, and have a barge come in and fill them up. You know, there's just the fact that they have to burn diesel, and so they start, you know, they're starting to get into some green energies and stuff like that to help out with that. You know, it's hard to get, you know, some of these communities are so small, they don't really have the funding or budget for anything, for any linemen or anything like that. So, you know, if something goes wrong, they do kind of some minimal testing and stuff and try to fix it. But, you know, if they have to bring linemen in, it takes, you know, if the outage is already due to weather, you know, they got to get the linemen in there, and which is costly, you know, have linemen come up for a few days or a week. So that's another challenge, big time. None of these small communities have linemen, and some of them might have one. When you know what that's like, you know, having one lineman on staff is not the easiest thing either. Should always at least have two, right?
Yeah.
So it's already hard to get linemen in regular situations in regular cities. So just imagine what it's like trying to find linemen for these remote areas.
And getting the equipment and the people there, all of the resources you need to restore power, to take whatever, you know, with your weather conditions and the distances involved, it presents some additional challenges that way, isn't it?
Yeah, especially if they don't have, you know, equipment on site. So, you know, if they have to bring a transformer in or something like that, then just getting it to the town is really hard to do. And if you do it in the winter and it's not, you know, part of a big order, then of course the shipping on something like that to fly it in is quite expensive.
Yeah, so I guess I never really thought about it till that Alaska isn't like, I keep referring to the lower 48, but that's really the referral we kind of got to make to it and what the majority of the utility industry is used to. But, when you talk about moving resources and moving equipment, up here, it's not just throw it on a truck, run it up the road to the next utility, you know what I mean? So maybe expand on that a little bit, just what those challenges look like, when you say sharing resources, maybe in a storm type situation, or, if you have an equipment failure, it's not just picking up the phone and calling the neighboring utility and say, hey, do you got an extra transformer you can run up here, or can you send some guys up here and give us a hand? It's really, in some cases, a pretty monumental effort to make that happen.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of logistics involved.
Yeah.
There definitely is. But we do have, some of our utilities do have pretty good relationships with each other, and like Nome is a bigger town, and some of the smaller outlying areas,
sure,
can call them sometimes and get help, but they're all dealing with the same storm, and usually that's what it is. It's hard to leverage that, and of course, some of these small utilities, it's really just all small transformers.
Sure.
So, but the hardest thing is if they break poles and stuff like that. That's kind of over and above what the local representative can do.
Yeah.
They can pull meters and see if it's right about in there, or they can put a fuse back in. But if there's something serious going on, like underground or something like that, then they got to call the big guns and get a contractor in.
So they go to the contract world when that stuff.
A lot of times, yeah.
Okay. What would it look like up here if you, I'm sure even people up here have heard the news of the last couple months, with, now I know you don't get hurricanes and stuff up here, but, what
kind of weather events do you have here?
What's
significant?
What does that look like in Alaska?
Well, so, what's been hitting us kind of hard is these slushy snowfalls or rain on top of snow, which causes, trees to break. Up in Fairbanks, already they had a storm event that just broke hundreds of trees. And, the common practice is, right, you clean up your right-of-ways, but, you can't control what's on the outside of the right-of-way. And we've definitely seen issues where somebody cut a little bit outside the right-of-way, and now we got to pay for a tree that's, and several $1,000s, for something like that. So, it's very specific that we don't go outside the right-of-way. It's hard to deal with those situations, and every once in a while, they do work with other utilities to bring them in if it's a really bad storm. So
now, is that just kind of confined to Alaska, or do you down in the lower 48? I mean, you might have, in the instance of the storms that just hit Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas, I mean, you had people coming from the entire United States, right, to those areas. They kind of just swamp them, and I imagine up here it's probably, I can imagine it's not as easy just to, you're not calling Washington and Oregon and Utah and California and say, hey, get up here and give us a hand. So, do people just understand that, hey, it's just going to take twice as long to put the lights back on, or what's that look like?
They do, and the communities kind of stick together.
Okay.
And they'll have warming areas, or a lot of times they end up staying with family and stuff like that. But if you have a pretty big event, it's hard to say what they'll do. I mean, sometimes they'll even just fly them out or fly out and just go stay someplace else for a while.
Yeah.
But a lot of these communities, though, they're used to being standalone, so they've got backups for their backups and stuff like that. And hopefully, most of the time they're prepared. They've got good engines and stuff like that, and those, have done their maintenance. And so hopefully it's not something like that. But every once in a while you run across where we just rebuilt it, but it still blew up, and then the other one's, supposed to be rebuilt next year, so we're running that one, and then the third one's on its last leg. We were gonna, so if anything happens to that one, then you're stuck with the one that's really on its last leg and, leaking everywhere and scheduled to be maintained the next year, but just happens every once in a while.
I'd imagine that you also have a hard time with staffing with qualified workers and well-trained workers. Is that as big an issue up here or a bigger one than what we have in the lower 48?
Well, it's hard to tell what's going on, down the lower 48, but because it just seems like it's a little easier to get training done down there. You've got more training schools and stuff like that, and I don't know if just the work outside is pretty hard on the person up here, working outside. Like at Golden Valley, it's a 30 below cutoff, so if it's 30 below or warmer, they're working outside, they're doing work, so
that's yeah, down there in the lower 48, that's normally around the 5 or 10 degree mark, right? And sometimes it goes a little lower depending the region you're in the United States. But I know the utility that I work for, I think if we got down to 10 degrees above zero, then it was select work. Obviously, if there's outages and stuff, you got to handle those. But we wouldn't be out doing typical maintenance work and things of that nature. And then obviously, if it gets lower, things go from there. But I guess it's just things you don't really think about when
up here in the wintertime, as Don says, it can get pretty cold and stay cold for a long time, and sometimes you got to work out in it. I grew up in the Rocky Mountains of the lower 48, and 20 below was nobody paid attention to it. You just went out and done your work, and I'm sure it's that way up here in Alaska to a certain extent. We all have to pay attention to weather and other factors here. So do you do extensive training here on how to work in colder weather, since that's what you're faced with most of the year? And I know that, you try and do most of the work, the utilities try and do most of the work up here in the summertime, but, reality is we have to deal with the cold weather. So is that part of everybody's training?
Well, we definitely train on cold weather, how to make sure you stay warm, keep water there, and of course if they're a big enough utility, they're working in groups and stuff like that. But I think probably one of the biggest advancements that I've seen is clothing, cold weather clothing that's arc rated, that's not the old cotton Carhartt that everybody used to wear, where if you're working for several hours in that and it starts to get wet, you start to get cold. I mean, they worked for a lot of years, but that old stuff, it doesn't dry out very fast, and so I think that's been a huge improvement, and the layering of clothing. You can buy jackets now that have several layers to them, so they all zip together, and they're a rain jacket too. So I think those advancements have helped quite a bit. And of course, the Alaska lineman has been using bunny boots from the military forever. They just seem to be the perfect fit. They got a heel on them. So
talk about that a little bit, because Mack and I were talking about it a little bit this morning, and so again, it's one of those things that you just really don't even consider unless you're in a climate or an area that you got to deal with it. And so, I think there's things that folks have to do up here in our line of work that a lot of people just don't even give a thought to. So talk a little bit about those.
The big old military bunny boot, and there used to be a couple different brands, like Beta and US, and of course, these guys work in them all day long. And the reason why they like them is that, if you get water in them, you can dump them out, put them back on, and you're probably still going to be just fine. Yeah. So that's been the go-to boot for many, many years. But even just living in Fairbanks, where I grew up, everybody had a pair of bunny boots. They were the sexy thing to wear, I guess. But, it's a pair of bunny boots, and you could walk around in shorts and a nice jacket, you were good. You were good most of the time. So I don't know, they just seem to work forever, and when they stop making those and the supplies start to dwindle, and they start scavenging from around the country to try to get more for Alaska. Most linemen, that's just all they use. Okay. It's kind of shaped right. Still for using your hooks and gaiters, and but they're getting harder to find. So you got a few people who are trying different things, but I tell you, most of the time you see bunny boots, and you're starting to see them kind of all wore out.
Okay.
So there's a new company who's trying to redo the whole bunny boot thing. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Good.
Yep. So, Don, I know that your organization sponsors some formal training every year and throughout the year. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So on the safety side of things, which is what I mostly deal with, so we do Lineman Safety Week, which we started through Alaska Power Association 5 years ago, I think, about. And kind of with the thought, when I first started with the company, one of the first things I heard is these small utilities, they got 2 linemen, they're can't afford to bring a high-end trainer up there just for 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it costs to bring the trainer up,
Sure.
Plus coming up to Alaska, the travel is expensive, and everybody's time is worth money. So you gotta. It's like for us too. When you go on vacation, you're pretty much down one whole day in travel.
Sure.
And so to get there, and down one day to get back. So it's the same for the trainers too. So the idea is we have some training in Anchorage where everybody can kind of get to as the hub, and so hopefully these utilities will send their employees. But at the same time, if something's going on and they can't send anybody, or at the time they're worried about something, and so they can't spare one of their 2 linemen to go have training, and then they don't come anyway. And our bigger utilities, they'll just bring someone up because it's more cost effective for them to bring someone on site if they've got 10 linemen. But I still encourage them to send one person from the big utilities to kind of represent and support the smaller utilities by keeping the training going. Eventually, it would be really a good program if we could get some of the bigger utilities to send one of their guys out to a small utility, in the cooperative spirit, as we say,
Sure.
to help keep these guys trained up.
Yeah.
But I don't get a lot of traction on that one, but I'm going to keep trying on that one.
Yeah, it's a worthy cause, so we've just got to keep after that and try and make that happen.
I think the Lineman Safety Week has been really good, though, and we've actually had some groundmen come in who aren't linemen, but they're in charge of helping the linemen when they show up to these small communities. So for them to have a little bit of an idea of terminology and how they do their work is beneficial for them too. So we've got a couple, call them groundmen. So they'll lay out, they'll get everything laid out and exactly all the parts that they need and have it all staged and ready to go, which is super helpful for linemen who are showing up. Let's just say they're there the week before Christmas. They want to get their stuff done and get back out of there, so they appreciate that.
So when it comes to these smaller utilities, what does it look like for their initial training? Because, obviously, I'm sure there is a pool of seasoned or experienced people out there, but normally, if you're one of them individuals, you're probably already working for somebody, right? And so being these if you only have 1 or 2 people working for you when it comes to the frontline worker, I would imagine it'd be tough to draw an individual, to that type of work environment where 1 or 2 of them are going to be doing all the work. So what's it look like to get those qualified individuals in those spots? It's got to be tough.
Yeah, well, a lot of them, they try to get them in the utility and see what they're made of a little bit, and then they'll try to do some training with them or send them out to do training, get them into the apprenticeship. And there's a couple of them that have their own apprenticeship programs.
Okay.
And I think, the hope is to have someone kind of local try to step up, because that's the ones that are going to stay with the community.
Gotcha.
And every once in a while, you'll get someone who says, I want to go to Alaska for a little while, and then, they end up in a town, and they like the people, and, they find a local girlfriend, and they end up staying, and so those are kind of happen occasionally, too. But, I think a lot of it is just on-the-job training, especially when it comes to your power plant operators.
Sure.
And then they'll get some what we call ground man training, just doing simple testing, pulling meters or just putting in fuses. They'll get some of that training in some of these small communities too. But a lot of them is part of the problem too. Is it's not really considered full-time work in some places.
Okay.
They come in and they check the fuel, fill the day tanks, maybe change the oil on something once a week, and then they go back and do their whatever else they're doing to make money. And so a lot of times there's just not a lot of money in working at the smaller plants there.
That's interesting. I mean, you never...
down in 48, we wouldn't think of that too much. There's some rural places, in small communities down in lower 48 too, but I believe that your challenges here in Alaska are a lot different and sometimes more intense than what most of the folks down lower 48 think of. Oh, this is an emergency, or I got to get this done, and so that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that. I mean, I just assumed, to your point, Mac, you work for a utility, right? And whether it's a co-op or a muni or contractor or whatever, you're a full-time employee, and you just, they might move you around or go different areas, but to essentially, hey, I'm going to go work a couple hours today at the utility, and then I'm going to go back and do my second job or whatever. That's just never even crossed my mind.
Yeah, and some of them, they get but a certain amount of pay, right, per day. They're not sticking around to clean things up or check things out, make sure everything's in good working order. They're just there to check the gauges real quick, make sure everything's still running. There's nobody sleeping in there or something. I don't know. And then they just take off, and they might have other jobs, but it's actually hard to find people in some of these communities that really want to even work at the utility.
Wow. And I would say on our side of things, it's a preferred career path, right? Yeah. Everybody's trying to get into utilities, you know what I mean? And it normally provides a pretty good living and a pretty good career, and so that's an interesting. I just never really thought about it that way. So some of the other issues, real quick, I'll just mention is that the ground moves a lot in Alaska.
Yeah, you got the tundra that's different. It's a whole different concept than most places in the rest of the United States.
And so sometimes, if you've got underground stuff, just shorts out, and there's no fixing it till summer. And so you'll end up, with these temporary wires right on top of the ground, and so that's just something else you don't see. And everybody, hates the poles up all over the place, but that's how you keep the power on in the winter.
Yeah.
I've seen lots of undergrounds just cut off, from the ground moving.
Yeah, you don't think of you don't associate Alaska with seismic activity, right? At least I did until I got up here and started talking to some folks. And
there's a lot of that up here, and then there's the tundra, which moves with frost and temperatures.
Yeah,
and it moves a lot.
Yeah,
they call it permafrost.
Yeah,
and so the freeze thaw just from winter to summer, you could have a couple of feet of movement in places every once in a while. And I had a house built on that, and it's a terrible situation. I had to adjust it every couple of years. Have a corner just drop out of nowhere.
Yeah, interesting. You guys definitely have your unique set of challenges up here for sure. Well, Don, I appreciate you taking a little time out of your morning to share with us some of the challenges up here, and giving everybody that's listening a little opportunity to see how, or I guess what folks need to deal with in the electric utility industry in Alaska. And so appreciate you taking the time to join us.
No problem. Thank you.
So let me give one last shout out here again to our podcast sponsor today, T&D PowerSkills. Again, T&D PowerSkills is a comprehensive 78-unit curriculum designed with an adult learner in mind. Control your message, control your delivery, control your costs with flexible delivery models that you can scale to your company's size. To learn more, visit us at tdpowerskills.com. Again, that's tdpowerskills.com. And again, if you use the referral code Tailboard 2024, you'll get an exclusive podcast listener 5% discount. As always, in closing, personal viewpoints of the participants may not necessarily reflect the stance of the Institute for Safety and Powerline Construction and its staff. It's highly advised to consult your company management before implementing any actions or policy changes. Please support the sponsors bringing this content to you. For more episodes of the ISPC Tailboard Talk, subscribe to your favorite podcatcher and be sure to leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. Mack, thanks for joining today as our special co-host. Appreciate the insight. Again, thanks to Don. Appreciate you taking the time and giving us your input as well. And
no problem.
Until next time, we will catch you again on the next episode of ISPC Tailboard Talks.